the history of the communities scattered through this middle Missouri Valley area. And thirdly, they want to know something about the biographies of the families in this area.
Okay.
So, and they're separated into their particular interests.
Okay.
They'll be working in those areas.
Well, you want me to start with just a brief history of me?
Please
Uh-huh.
do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was born in 1938 in a White House right down over the hill here.
Well, you're just a youngster.
Just a youngster. And I have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Nebraska, and just retired in April
Wow.
from having our own business. So it's
Yeah.
a different experience for me. But meanwhile, growing up around here, um, the there was always the talk of the Mormons being buried up here. Now, right down here on the bottom, close to my house down here, was a gentleman by the name of Heinlein, and he knew where this cemetery was, and he was always going to tell my dad, and he never got around to it. You know, so I'm trying to find it now. When we built this house in '78, we pushed out a little bit of hill here, and we didn't hit any, as far as we know, didn't hit any graves. Right up here, we did hit a grave of the Woodland Culture Indians. Now, the Woodland Culture have been around here for a long time.
Sure. Nebraska phase.
About 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kivett from the University of Nebraska came out because of Edith Neal. She invited him out, and one hot July day, we dug up a grave right up here, a little ways up past the building,
Yeah.
about this big square. And I think we had 12 of them in there. You know,
12.
Wow.
what they did, they took the bodies and put them in the trees, and when all the flesh was gone, they took the big bones, put a thong around, and put the skull on top.
Yeah.
And there were some infants in there as well. And then they could tell that they died from arthritis. Of course, they lived in those half in the ground houses.
Yeah.
And
What kind of houses?
pardon? Well, they were dug in the ground, and then they had a little bit above them supposedly.
Oh, okay.
And there's a piece of ground over here that we used to farm when I was a kid that had 3 humps on it. Each hump was this dark spot when you plowed it. Back in those days, we plowed everything. And right in the middle of one of these was a burned area where they had the fire. And ever since I was a kid, was hunted arrowheads. I've got a good collection of arrowheads, and in that particular site, we found a bone fish hook. And they did, fish around here with fish hooks. And right down here, one of the old timers said there was a big lake on this side of the highway next to the bluff. And they had pickerel, even had pickerel in there, believe it or not.
Wow.
Pike and pickerel. Anyway, and then clams. And we find a lot of those clam shells over in the fields. But the Dr. Kivett from Nebraska said that they got their flint, which they used for their arrowheads. They hauled that all the way from South Dakota. Didn't have any natural flint around here.
Marvin Kivett was an archaeologist from the University of Nebraska. He did probably more than most in getting back into these Nebraska phase Indians. Were in this area up until about 1350 A.D., and then suddenly they disappeared. We have no idea where they went.
Well, in 1938, I have a copy of this book that the Historical Society put out. In 1938, they did a dig along the whole bluff area here on the Nebraska side. Have you seen that?
I have not.
And this is about all the Woodland Culture Indians that they found, and they dug up artifacts, and they hired local people to help them dig, and they've got all the sites dug up and locating the poles and all of that, you know. So
I'm trying real hard to remember the name of the artist who worked for the Omaha World Herald and made the original find of the Nebraska phase in what is today Humboldt Park. Did a lot of painting.
for the World Herald, you say?
Yeah, in the 1890s.
Oh.
And scientists came from various parts of the world to look at what he
Not
found.
talking about Catlin, are you?
No.
Catlin was a good artist that,
That'd be 1838.
okay,
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
back then.
So this,
So anyway, I was growing up with the Indian culture, and I can show you my collection if you're interested in that of arrowheads.
would you care to see those?
Love to.
You see a lot of
Love to.
arrowheads, I'm sure. Okay. And then, of course, one of my projects, and why I got a hold of the gentleman, I don't remember his name, I've got it written down.
Von Thurber? Elder Thurber?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
His wife was ill, I remember at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe she still is, but one of my projects is to try to find this cemetery. Now, the diary of John D. Lee says that they buried 12 of them up here, and they started in the southwest corner or something, and then they're all organized, and they had coffins, or they had caskets,
Yeah.
coffins, I guess.
Yeah.
And they should be findable, although, you know, it's been a long time. I thought I had found them up here last summer. I did some terracing and found some old, looked like burned things, like brick,
Yeah.
and turned out I couldn't locate them. But I was wanting to find out from him or from the Historical Society if they have some ground penetrating radar that I could use. Well, I find that's very expensive.
It is. It is.
And it's not easy to get hold of.
Have you ever heard of divining rods and finding graves in that way?
Yes, I have. Back when we used to do, we had some people that witched for wells when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then we practiced, you know, with a stick from a box elder tree. It had to be from a box elder. And we thought we could find wells, but of course, you know, we didn't ever prove anything. But was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when they celebrated the Mormons coming across from Nauvoo, across Iowa?
96.
Okay, way back then,
Yeah.
okay. And my my wife's from Creston, Iowa. And so we were over from Afton, actually. We were over there because her relation was involved in helping put on this, and we went.
What is her name?
Whose
Her
name?
maiden name?
Fluckey.
F.
F-L-U-C-K-E-Y.
Okay.
And we just been through that. Her great 7 generations back was a Hessian soldier who came over and
In the American Revolution.
and jumped ship and ended up fighting with George Washington and was a tailor and supposedly made some clothes for him. You know, so that's kind of an interesting story.
Interesting.
But there's a place over there where the Mormons lost a bunch of people coming across. I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't Canesville, because that's right here in Council Bluffs, but over by Creston.
Mount Tisdale?
Yeah, that sounds right. And there was a gal there who was finding unmarked graves with the divining rod.
Yeah.
So, and of course we didn't know anything, couldn't prove anything, but she said, yeah, right there, you know.
The divining rod, is that just a stick from a box elder tree like you were saying?
No, well, it can be
She was
that
using wire.
wire.
Yeah, she was using wire.
Shaped in
Copper
like
wire, probably.
or
I
gold.
can't remember if it was
Yeah.
copper.
Yeah, it'd be copper.
So, that's where I've seen that done, but I've never seen any proof. You know, the divining rod thing, I looked into it one time, and it's more kind of like gambling. You know, when they find something, they brag about it, but they don't tell you about all the times they miss. So it looks like it's really good, you know. Let's see, what else you need to get from me.
We have questions.
Okay.
You farmed a lot of this land down here.
Actually, I farmed with the neighbors, but my dad owned 160 in here and only 3 acres in the bottom where that house sat.
Oh, I see.
And he fed cattle down there, but we farmed around this side of the hill.
We're looking for evidences of limestone, which was used as foundation under pioneer cabins, and old bricks which were taken from
The
Fort
fort.
Atkinson and brought here to make chimneys for the summer quarters.
And floors, yeah. And it's in that diary, and we think that probably what happened is that that's all covered up, you know, because the Mormons call this Meyer Creek up here. And you've read these diaries, have you, John D. Lee's?
I haven't.
Okay, so they talk about the burial. They buried him a half mile up from Meyer Creek up the bluff. Well, half
Right.
a mile is, you know,
Which now is called Mill Creek.
yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. And they had our understanding is they had their buildings south of the creek, and they let their cattle run north into the Indian country. And the Indians would ask for a cow every now and then for rent.
Yeah.
And actually the Indians ran them out, apparently. They were afraid. They
They
took
did.
off in a big hurry. from this
Pawnee.
area. Yeah.
Pawnee came here.
But they do talk about getting bricks from the fort in that diary. And obviously those bricks, we think, are all
Do
covered
you have a
up.
copy of the,
Just a little chunk of that
yeah.
excerpt.
Do you have the original?
No, in fact, I tried to get it, but it's out at
At BYU?
hmm?
At BYU?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can find that.
We
Yeah.
have treasures.
Okay.
Of course, John D. Lee, he was sacrificed, we think, the Meadow Mountain Massacre.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the Mormons think of that, but it appears that he was sacrificed as a token to be guilty. So anyway, where was I? You had more questions.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of any evidence of where the 600 acres are that the soldiers farmed in 1820, 27?
Yes, they talk about that, and it was the Mormons farmed that same ground because
Right.
it was broke up.
Yeah. And that's in the Lee Diary?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can find that.
Mm-hmm.
It's bordered by the bluff and by the old river bank over here, which you can still make out. It'd be about 600 acres. So they must have dodged this big lake that was down here at the time.
Yeah. Now,
And they picked rouse berries, but their spelling wasn't very good. But
Rouseberries.
they were wild rouse berries.
yeah.
Would that be raspberries?
Uh-huh.
August 28th of 1846, the Mormons were at Cutler's Park, where Forest Lawn Cemetery is. And the west edge borders Mormon Bridge Road. In there, on the high ground on either side of that road, were 3 great camps of the Mormons at Cutler's Park. And the Indians came, 90 Omaha Indians and almost that many Otoe, Missouri came in 2 delegations the same day asking for rent. And the bottom line is that the Omaha Indians tried to persuade the Mormons to camp north of the ruins of Fort Atkinson, because they said that is Omaha hunting ground. Anything from the fort south was Otoe, Missouri country. Have you any information about that, the division of hunting rights between the Omaha and the Otoe,
No,
Missouri?
I really don't know. Have you talked with John Slater down at the Fort Atkinson?
I haven't.
You should probably contact him
Yeah.
since you're so close.
Okay.
He manages the fort down here.
Yeah, John Slater.
John Slater.
Okay. All right.
He lives. You know where the fort is. You've been by it. Did you stop by it on your way up or not?
We didn't feel we had enough time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I don't know whether any of you feel you want to make an appointment for tomorrow or the following day to come back and interview Richard, or what do you think? I know you have a lot of places to go. You only have 2 days to work this on your own.
And we can write to him now.
Yeah.
Email.
You have
Oh,
an email?
good.
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
So my address.
Uh-huh.
We've got your address here
Email.
somewhere.
No,
not
your-
not your email address. I guess you have this. It's in the car.
Jeannie had it. Just tell us. It'll be on this tape.
Oh, okay. It's D.E. Cruz, K-R-U-S-E, at huntel.net.
Did you say DE?
Yeah, D.E. That's for Dick and Evelyn.
And KRUSE?
Mm-hmm.
At
H-U-N-T, Huntel. That's our local telephone company.
T-E-L, H-U-N-T.
Huntel.net.
Great.
Thank you. And your mailing address is?
8153, County Road 41. Fort Calhoun, Nebraska 68023.
68023.
And your phone number?
Area 402
Yes.
426 5940.
So you said
Now, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
you said your neighbor had said that he knew of a cemetery up here and you haven't been able to find it. That's right. Is that right?
No, he said I thought what you said was that your father knew where it was and was going to tell the neighbor, but
I know.
never
The
The
did.
neighbor was going to tell his
Well,
father.
it was the other way
Now,
around.
the neighbor of this Heinlein, his mother supposedly was a Mormon. So apparently there were some Mormons that stayed around or maybe married.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they talked about, in this little piece of diary I have, they talk about going over into Iowa and buying seed potatoes. Crossing the river in the ice, on the ice,
Yeah.
in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
So potatoes and corn.
Can you imagine keeping those potatoes from freezing as you return, crossing over?
I think there was a ferry there too at the time. So it's a little vague.
Now, I spent quite some time with Mary Sully because the journal material I have seen indicated that summer quarters was by the bluff south of Mill Creek,
Just right here by where you started up my driveway.
and that the cemetery was on a high eminence a half mile south of the summer quarters.
Yep.
Where would
And
that
they
put
called
you?
it Fairview.
Fairview, right. Where would that put you, a half mile south?
Well, if you, I think, if you look at this territory, all we disturbed was right from this little tree up to here. My guess is that they would go right up to this first high spot up here, or maybe the next high spot, and that would be it.
That's entirely possible.
And why would they? I mean, depends. It was probably hot.
Yeah.
They said, well, this is fine, and we don't know that all these big oak trees were here. They might not have been. They talk about going when they left, when the pioneers took off for Elkhorn or west, took off across the treeless prairie. So we know that it was pretty well bare west of here.
Yeah.
But these old oaks, I mean, these bluffs might have been full of oaks at that time. I don't know that.
Well, the early scientists and some of the French who came up here said these hills were barren
Could be.
when they came. So, the Indians used to burn everything off.
They did.
Yeah, they burned everything off in the fall, and in that way they were able to hunt better.
Well, I think it brought the new grass for the buffalo.
Yeah, and that also.
Do you know of any? You said you knew that summer quarters was just at the bottom of your driveway. Are there any stories you've heard about things that occurred in summer quarters?
Other than the diary.
Other than the diary, huh? Okay. So we can get it.
We need to see that diary.
So how can we help you find that
Probably in the
cemetery?
Archives,
collections.
special collections.
Now, I'll be honest with you. I thought Mary Sully's place was kind of a rise in the ground.
It's a fairly high spot, yes. But they buried it on the bluff. They buried him on the bluff up here.
Generally did. Generally did.
Because that would be swampy. In fact, it is still swampy. It was really swampy when I was young. Right around north around that high spot.
Are we a half mile south of
No.
Mill Creek here?
No.
How far south are we?
Oh, I'd say you're probably a quarter of a mile south.
So you would say to go on the hills further over.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have a treasure finder,
A
metal
metal
detector.
detector?
I haven't got it going yet, but they apparently put these coffins together with nails because they talk in the diary about paying somebody so much to make the coffins.
Yeah.
And those nails, probably old cut nails, but there may be something left there. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Something that you
I
could
doubt
look
it's
at
going to be much to find.
with a try.
The only other choice I have is I've got a trencher. I could do some trenching, and try to just find them by trial and error that way. But sure like to find them because what's going to happen when I'm gone is that this whole place is going to be developed,
Yeah.
And now Edith, can't remember what year it was. but
Now you're related to Edith?
no, well,
Your wife?
not directly.
Oh, I see. Okay.
My father was one of 8 and his sister married a Neal,
Oh,
George Neal,
I see.
and these were his old maid
Yeah.
sisters. He had three of them.
Yeah.
He had three of them. So we just called her Aunt Edith, but no, she's no relation. But she had somebody from the Mormon church out here showing them about where the grave was, and at that time I was there. She said, "Well, let's just leave it alone. Let's not even try to find it." That was her opinion. So.
She's a good lady.
Edith?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean this gal from the church said that.
Yeah.
Just not mess around trying to find this.
Oh, I see.
Mm.
Because obviously, the Mormons have many, many graves from here to from Nauvoo to
Sure.
Salt Lake City, and
Sure, lots of them.
not identified at all.
Yeah. Do you have
But now
other questions?
Brigham Young supposedly has a child in one of these, what was buried up here.
Summer
a
quarters?
boy, yeah. Died
Hmm. And how did you know that? It's
in the diary.
in the Lee diary.
Okay.
Gotta get that diary.
Yes, put it online, please.
Yeah, we gotta read that diary.
Yeah, I'd sure like to have a copy of that if you can find
We'll try.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
See if we can get it on a CD.
I figured out he was like 35 or so when he was in charge of this place.
He was the leader here at Summer Quarters?
Yeah. And we talk about melding an oxen down, yoke of oxen. They just got them so overly heated in July.
Yeah.
There was a bridge went across this next creek down here, which is
Moore? Moore Creek?
Morse Creek. Moores Creek.
And it was Myers at the time, you said? They called it Myers Creek at the
No,
time?
this was Meyer Creek.
How did they spell Meyer?
M-I-R-E. It's like they mired down in it.
Yeah. Oh.
All full of mud.
Hmm.
Oh.
That makes a different picture, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
See, because the mud was coming out of here with any kind of farming, and we know for a fact that whole area around this Heinlein area was just built up. It just would flood and with mud, and so that's probably why that's all buried. Now, probably ground penetrating radar would be a really good way to find those brick down there. I would think.
Limestone.
Yeah.
Is Ron Heinlein, is he well informed?
Oh, his grandfather was Solly Heinlein, the one that knew where the Mormons were, whose
Yeah.
mother supposedly was a Mormon.
Yeah. Has he shown interest in history that he might?
Some, yeah, his family history, yes.
Is he out working or
He's retired,
he's retired?
but I think right now he's down in Disney World with his grandkids.
That's
Always too late.
yeah. Well, we surely appreciate
Yes.
you taking
Yeah,
the
thank
time
you very
to
much.
help us.
Well, not very helpful, but
That's very
No,
helpful.
it's very helpful.
That lead to the journal, but that's going to open things up.
You didn't know about the journal?
Not that it had anything about this era. about
Yeah.
This
Oh,
part of
really?
church
I had
history.
seen little excerpts from it, just like in other works I've read, but I never saw.
Wonder
I
if
didn't know that we
Susan
had the
knows.
actual journal. That's fantastic.
Great.
How
We'll
about
try to
these,
get you a copy.
arrowheads?
Yeah, could we see those?
See a couple of those real quick?
Sure. Sure. Let
Do
me,
you have time?
I'm just thinking.